edition of Design Lecture Series. Today we have a renowned font designer, font engineer, and a very creative person, Mr. Muthu Nedumaran. As we go towards the first anniversary of Typography Society of India, we have a lot of interesting talks lined up over the next few months. First of all, on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Mr. Muthu Nedumaran. I'll just give a short introduction about him. He is a legendary font designer and font engineering expert in Indian languages. And all those who are using Apple devices will realize that all the Indian language fonts and Indo-Chinese fonts you see in Apple OS, all of them are designed and executed by Mr. Muthu Nedumaran. It is a very proud moment for us to have him as a speaker today. He was keynote speaker in Typography Day also earlier. He has over 3 decades of experience in typography. He started out by drawing large banners and posters with Tamil and Latin inscriptions while at school in the 70s. His initial works in the digital space were bitmapped fonts and low resolution fonts for printers. Later, his type design for all the Indic and Indo-Chinese scripts are now bundled into operating systems like Mac OS, Windows, iOS, and Android. The popular Tamil type called Annai-Multiscript continues to render Tamil text beautifully. On all this iPhones, iPads, watches, Apple watches, HTC Android devices. The same typeface is used as a standard type for Tamil text by the Ministries of Education in Singapore and Malaysia also. Besides typography, Mr. Muthu Nedumaran has innovated and built fast and efficient input methods for all languages he works on various platforms. Over to you, Mr. Muthu Nedumaran, for your talk. Thank you for joining us.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Typography Society of India for giving me this opportunity to present about some of the work that I've done, and particularly one special project that I'm working on right now. So we've got a lot to cover, so let's get started right away. Now, I was asked to introduce myself and say a few things about what I did when this whole thing about my love for typography started. When I started getting interested in typeface design, I didn't know the term typeface design. The word font didn't appear in my vocabulary at the time. But I was very interested in what happened in printing presses because my dad was a writer. And I used to follow him to all these presses where his publications were printed, his invitation cards were printed, his brochures or posters were printed, and I was very intrigued by the way they assembled letters and got these blocks together to get some text printed on hundreds of thousands of pages. So that got me excited, looking at each of those slots, each of those metal pieces, and how letters were carved onto them and how they inscribed beautiful letter forms for print. My dad was a Tamil writer, so a lot of the presses that I visited had typefaces that were designed for Tamil scripts. But the frustration set in the year 1983 when we started doing events for school children and we wanted to publish books and magazines in 3 different scripts. And we had an issue. When you want to do something in Tamil, it costs a lot more than what used to cost, the cost of a page in English or Malay. Malay uses the Latin script, by the way, and it was a lot cheaper, a lot easier. But in Tamil, you cannot edit once they have composed the page. You cannot make changes. There are no typefaces. There are no, you can't have a bold text when you want it. So we had all these issues. That made me angry, and I wanted to do something about this. So when I graduated in 1985, there was this MS-DOS computer. That was the first computer. This is 1985. I don't know if all of you were born by then, but that was the state-of-the-art machine that I had. How do I make these machines speak Tamil? Will this have an answer to this question, to these frustrations that we had? So I started digging. I'm an engineer by qualification. I graduated with a degree in electronics engineering. So I look at some of the devices, some of the parts of the computer, and started looking at where these characters are generated, these characters that appear on the screen, where they're generated. Can I reverse engineer that and make them display Tamil text instead of English or alongside English? So I found that particular chip that's called the character generator chip, and I started looking at how characters are stored into them. And that's how they are stored. They are like bitmaps of all the Latin text that we know of. Now, how do I get my text to display on the screen that only can display 80 characters wide and 25 lines? And it has a limited number of space, a limited amount of space for you to put a character inside. And how do I get the keyboard to send Tamil keys when you're pressing the English text? So I started writing programs, I started designing text, and a bit of what I did is this. This is the character generator, how the alphabet capital A is stored. I want to skip all that because I know we are designers, we are not engineers, but you get the idea of how the text is stored on the device. And if I gray out all the zeros, you can see the ones appearing, and that's how A is stored. And I copied the idea and stored Tamil letters, like that's how Ka is stored. And you see that that's the vertical line space, the vertical character space. You have that's just one line of zero, so you can't fill up the entire 8 zeros that you have. So you have to squeeze your Tamil in there. And that's your baseline, that's your extender, that's your descender. That's the limit you have to work with. You cannot set your own extenders or descenders. So with that, I got the screen done. And how do I do the printer? Using the same technique, I wrote assembler routines, programming every pin as how it should hit the paper when the print head moves from left to right. This was dot matrix printers. This was before laser printers were popular. So again, that's how I designed the letters. And this is the first publication that was done with dot matrix printers. A publisher who was a friend of my father's wanted to be the first Tamil publisher to publish a book that was printed with the system that I designed at the time. Then came laser printers, like mid-80s. And then again, using the same technique, I designed PCL bitmap fonts. Scalable, TrueType, or Adobe's PostScript fonts were not yet popular. And this is the time, and then after that, of course, dailies, monthlies, weeklies, periodicals, and all that started using my system because they were now able to make Tamil pages a lot easier. They can edit, they can change tags, they can put different typefaces, and all that stuff. Now, this was done at the time when there was no internet, there was no Google, and there were no mobile phones. I don't know if you can imagine such a time. Even I can't, because although I did come from that time, I can't imagine there was a time when there was no internet, no Google. I couldn't Google to find out how this programming language worked, how this PCL specification worked. No, I couldn't find. I can do that now, even for technologies that emerged at that time, but I couldn't find then. So, what were my tools? 1985, what were the tools that I used to make this? Well, that's my first tool. That's the second one. If some of you have used MS-DOS computers, that's the text editor. And that's the assembler language, which was used to write programs for the Intel architecture, Intel CPU. So that's square paper, text editor, and assembler language. Those were my tools. Then came Microsoft Windows, which had graphics, user interface. You can use a mouse to move things around. And this was the most sophisticated tool for me at the time because it could register a pixel. Every time I click on the screen, that pixel is registered. And then I would go and write programs to interpret those pixels and convert them to fonts. But that was all the fun stuff. Anyway, 25 years later, there's a lot more stories to tell you, but there's no time. So 25 years later, I had these typefaces for all of the Indian languages, Indo-Chinese languages, Sri Lankan language, included in iOS and macOS. So that gives you a chronology of things that I did from 2010. Anyway, today I'm going to talk about this new typeface, which is like the star of today's talk. I'm calling it Annai. Annai in Tamil means mother. That's because this is a derivative of another typeface that I did much earlier called Amma, which is also another name for mother. So because it's a derivative, both of these are dedicated to my mom, my late mom. The metaphor is, how would you like a typeface, for a letter that is writing to your mother? So it's like your handwriting, not too formal, but it's pleasant for your eyes. I'll give you a little bit of insights and briefly describe what this typeface looks like, and then talk about some internals. What is this good for? It's ideal for informal text, secondary voice, if you want to say something while you're saying something formal, for call-outs, posters, banners, presentations like what I'm doing now, and it could be a single template for multiple scripts. So if you're doing a presentation in English, Tamil and Hindi or Marathi, this could be a typeface that you can use it for, because then you have something that harmonizes across all the languages. It could be an ideal typeface for a notes app because it resembles a handwritten typeface. Now, the primary goal of this is to be a multi-script typeface. So I wanted to make sure that the Devanagari, which covers Hindi, Marathi, Tamil, and a lot of those Latin languages, they all harmonize together. So if you have Indians living abroad in France, for example, and they are preparing a poster that has something in French and something in Hindi and something in Tamil, they can have a typeface that harmonizes across all of their messages. Now, in Devanagari, I've also included Vedic signs for those who are interested in Sanskrit. Are people using it today? I don't know, but we wanted to make it complete, so we included that. We included Tamil fractions. I'm sure nobody is doing that today, but we wanted to make sure that this font has it. So if somebody wants to look at how Tamil fractions look like, this font will be able to render that for them. And our goal is to cover all the major Indian scripts. Not that I'm not interested in the minor ones. We'll get them to that. Get to them later. All of the Southeast Asian scripts, including Myanmar, Lao, Khmer, Balinese even at some point. That's a goal. Now, let me go through some unique features of each script, all right? And then talk about a couple of issues that I can share with some internals, some take-home messages that you can also use in your designs. Now, that's Devanagari, and you can see the start and the end of the Sharoreka, which is the headline, has got a blob, right? Now, that's some magic in there. When you break this word into two, you'll see that blob added. I'll show that demo to you later. You see the vertical strokes, they're all identical. In fact, these vertical strokes are the same strokes that will appear in Tamil. If you're using Glyphs app, those are like component glyphs that you can actually, paste them across when you design. The same strokes appear in like capital or small case L or I in Latin. And they're all based on, the T sign that you see, where the A matra meets the Sharoreka, that's the same junction you will see even in Tamil A matra, because they look the same. Now, this is the magic that I'm going to show you. If you look at, these are two separate words, and each of them, you can't actually do this, because when you join these two letters, you will see the blobs, knocking onto each other. But we did some magic on that. Now, these things will work across AAT, which is Apple's advanced typography technology, as well as OpenType. Well, Apple also supports OpenType very beautifully, so you can actually do this entirely in OpenType, but there are some issues which we can talk about during question and answer later. Now, the blobs that I talked to you about, so this is like, one word, every letter is connected. Now, if I split the letter, you see that the blobs are getting inserted at the end of the first letter and the beginning of the second letter. When I merge them, the blobs disappear. They appear again, right? So that's some magic that I can explain to you how we do that later on. In Tamil, you see the same strokes that you see in Devanagari, especially the terminals. The ta, the first letter, you can see that it's written, the entire letter is written without a pen lift. Likewise, the spaces between the matras and the base letters are all taken into account. So they harmonize very well with the design that we did for Devanagari as well. Now we also included the old style letters. These are no longer in use, but even you need them to say that they are no longer in use, at least to say they are no longer. And some people are loving this. They are trying to, bring their usage back. So I use those even when I write today. They've gone, disappeared, they were like decades ago, but people have not forgotten. I think it's the same issue for Malayalam, because people are going back to traditional Malayalam typography or orthography, although the modern one, the reformed one, has become an official one, but people are going back to the reformed. Technology allows that, so we included that as well. Now Latin, we had matching Latin, we have contextual forms, we have ligatures, all the good stuff that we have seen on Latin. Now for Latin, I had the privilege of pleasure working with my good friend Tan Swee Lee and her colleague Chen Yin, who are Malaysians as well. They've been long-time typographers, and it's interesting that we had to meet in an overseas typographic event to realize that we were both Malaysian. So they were very generous, and they worked with me in finishing the Latin and extending that design to all the extended Latin languages that use that extended Latin script, like German, French, Vietnamese, and all that. Now, this is some of the work that we had used in our discussions. We looked at how we wanted to unify the way the terminals end in each script, the connecting points, to make sure that there's not too much smudging, and also to reduce the congestion, especially when in the numbers like 6, 8, 9. The similar things exist in Tamil, which I'll show you shortly. Now, the finished product gives you a very harmonious look across all the 3 scripts. And we want to realize the same thing across the other scripts that we're planning to add on to this family. And that's another example of Latin, Devanagari, and Tamil appearing in one screen. And before I finish, let me give you some design insights. First, let me talk about Latin. This is the original design. You can see that it's slightly broader than the new one when you compare to the Tamil one. And I had the privilege of showing this to the late Herra Unga, who was also my teacher at Reading when I did my unrest. And he told me that if I stick to this design, the Latin sometimes can overwhelm Tamil because it has got less stroke density, and it can appear bigger when you put both the scripts together. So, I condensed it a little bit. Now I think it appears, and he was right, it's a lot more harmonious now. You don't see any script dominating over the other, so you reduce that script dominance, which is very important when you design for harmony. Now, what I was telling you about earlier, the joints, we wanted to make sure that they are natural. When you normally write it, you don't actually see a disjointed points there, but we wanted to show a little bit of a pen lift over there. So you see, like the second last letter, the ni, you see that the E matra actually starts slightly above the headline. Likewise, the last letter. So it shows a little bit of touching, but not so much joining. Now, for Devanagari blocks, we explored. I had a lot. Went back to my old days of writing assembler code. So I was trying to, how do I make these things work? So one idea I thought of was to have different length of headlines and then match them programmatically based on the length of the word. But that was too much work, and it's arbitrary. We don't know how long a word is going to be and how many of those we need to design. It's not like the E matra that we designed for a very limited number of words. So we abandoned that idea. We ended up doing this. I'm giving you different glyphs in different colors. So you can see there are a lot of little components that join together to give you that blob effect. We can discuss this if you want. If you have questions, I can talk about this later on. Conjuncts, we had a lot of discussion about this, and Pooja Saxena, so some of you may be aware of her. She and I had some very interesting exchanges on this. And the decision was, do we make the parts of the conjunct touch or join? I know the new trend is to have them joined, have them developed fully as a glyph, instead of using half forms that are like half touching. which was done those days before all this OpenType stuff came about. But I wanted to show off my blogs, because that's like the highlight of this whole typeface. So, okay, yeah, I understand and I agree that, we must have completely drawn glyphs for all these conjuncts, but having them touch instead of join gives it a little bit of difference. That little imperfection is I consider a unique feature of this typeface. So we reached a compromise. Okay, we don't disjoin them, but we join them, but we touch them, but we not necessarily join them. So it was a design decision. Then, when will it be ready? Well, if you have the macOS Big Sur, you can download it now. It's available. Some of the updates have not gone in there, but it's usable. All the 3 scripts are there. Not yet the extended Latin, but you can download and use them now. So with that, I thank you, and I look forward to questions. Thank you very much. Thank you, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you very much, Muthu Anna, for your wonderful talk.
Thank you.
We are all looking forward to hearing about this multi-script typeface. It is a very interesting concept which is very much in need of today. Graphic designers generally are very excited to hear about multi-script typefaces. Thank you very much, Muthu Anna, for your wonderful talk. We are all looking forward to hearing about. I will just, before I go further, I would like to take one moment to make a small announcement to all the viewers of Typography Society today. I'm extremely happy to give you information about the next speaker of Typography Society. Dr. Fiona Ross will be talking to us on research-based practice in designing type for South Asian scripts. This will be on the 27th March, Saturday at 5 p.m. Okay, now I will start reading from the questions. One is Muthu, sir. The first one is that when we discuss a multi-script font, like you have mentioned, you have designed now, how do you manage the inherent anatomy of 3 different cultures? Because we are talking about English, Devanagari, Marathi, and Tamil. So tomorrow you might be having another multi-script font, which might be of Oriya also, of Malayalam also, Kannada also, Gurumukhi also. So how do you look at the visual characteristics of 4 different cultures and then make them look harmonious in your design?
It's an excellent, very good design, a very good question. It is actually a challenge, especially when you want to design or when you want to include a script that reflects the cultural or the linguistic or typographical heritage of that particular writing system. And we all know that even though all the languages are in the Indian subcontinent, they all have different historical backgrounds. The tools that were used to write those scripts actually differ, and that actually influenced the shape of the letters in a big way. What more if you want to include alphabets from the other side of the planet, or down south, when you go down to, well, the Indian, the Brahmic derived scripts may have some things in common, so you can somehow reach a compromise. But what when we want to do include Urdu at some point, which is written in completely a different direction script. So we have to somehow find a compromise, and that's extremely challenging, but equally interesting. One example I would show you is Tamil has a traditional italicized appearance. If you look at the old palm leaf manuscripts, Tamil has the writing or the written form on those manuscripts had some italicization, or rather, a slant. Not the angle is slightly different, not the regular slant angle that you see on computers. You don't see that in Devanagari, for example. But in this case, we have come to a compromise. We can't have Devanagari italicized and then Devanagari upright and Tamil italicized and call them that they are, see a harmony in them. We can't do that. So we introduce a slight harmony in Devanagari here as well. We reduce that the italicization or the slant angle of Tamil, so it doesn't look too foreign to Tamil, and it doesn't look too foreign to Devanagari as well. So this is one of the ways we found balance when we combine scripts from different cultures. Latin, I was mentioning earlier during my talk, the Latin in Annai is slightly condensed. It's not a regular Latin, it's like a condensed Latin in a regular typeface. That's because it has to make way for the harmony to coexist. So these are the kind of tweaking we have to do to realize that. And we're very extremely excited to look for these challenges when we start incorporating other scripts into the family as well.
And when we talk about the conjuncts, which you have shown in your slide, that you were thinking about joining them, and some of them, you think you have a design decision to make, whether the conjuncts are joined or
touched,
separated. But this kind of design challenges occur in all the scripts when you're talking about multi-script.
Yeah.
So is it possible to make that kind of a decision consistent throughout, or again it depends on the structure of each language?
Yeah, I think the priority is to realize the harmony. As I mentioned, the primary intent is for the design to be harmonious across multiple scripts. So we have to probably look at it from that angle. And what kind of changes or what kind of design decisions we have to make to ensure that harmony exists when we add the new script to the family. For example, the next ones that I'm working on is Malayalam and Gurmukhi. Maybe because they have less complexity in the systems, right? But Gurmukhi doesn't use that much conjunct, so that decision doesn't really come in between. And Malayalam has very clear presentation. But of course, when we go into traditional orthography, then you have a lot of those conjunct forms in separate, they require individual glyphs. But even then, the design decision is not that difficult to make because they're all individuals. They don't combine like how Devanagari does. But I foresee a challenge when we do Bengali, for example, one of my favorite scripts, and it's got different hands, the way Bengali, and I'm so very happy Fiona is going to be the next speaker. She's like the authority when it comes to designing Bengali scripts, and she was my teacher at Reading. So and she will show the different hands in writing Bengali and how do you incorporate that script into the family without losing the essence of the script is going to be a challenge. So I'm actually quite looking forward to that.
Yeah, that is because it is a real tough thing for a designer to look at, because the grid structure itself is different in Gurumukhi and Malayalam and Bengali.
Yes.
and to make it harmonious in a multi-script font. And traditionally Malayalam and Tamil was written with a
Yeah,
stylus family.
yeah,
Gurumukhi and Devanagari were not. They were
right,
using different tools for that.
right,
So to think about getting that original flavor and of that culture
right,
of Devanagari, Gurumukhi, and Bengali and
right,
Malayalam and Tamil, I think
right,
it is one of the real toughest challenges for a designer.
right, right. That's
How
true.
do you manage to
Um,
get the excite harmonious in all of them?
Correct. I think there are two parts to it. One is, of course, the design. And, I will have to engage local speakers as well. I'm very familiar with Malayalam. Gurmukhi, I'm quite familiar because there's a huge culture. I've got lots of Punjabi friends myself in Malaysia. There's a community here. So both the scripts I'm very familiar. So it's not good. I have some ideas already, so it's not going to be very difficult to achieve them. But for the others, like Oriya, for example, I know the script, I know the workings. I've done the Oriya font before. But how will a native Oriya speaker look at something like an Annai-influenced design in an Oriya typeface?
That is very difficult.
Correct. So I will have to engage, and I'll have to. I'm actually greatly looking forward to that opportunity, which is why, instead of jumping and doing all the scripts at one time, I'm doing it one at a time to study that. I think the outcome of the entire project is going to be extremely satisfying because I know we will have materials that we can pass on to budding researchers and design students who would like to study and look at and probably take it even further to realize. We have to start somewhere. So I'm hoping that this will be a start.
I'll just read out some of the questions. Has it got Kannada glyphs? Somebody from
right.
Facebook, somebody has asked this.
Yeah. So, well, as I mentioned, all of the scripts are in the pipeline. They are in my list. I'm just doing Malayalam and Gurmukhi as the next scripts because I'm very familiar with them. Probably Kannada and Telugu will be done together. They have some similarities. So some design decisions can be applied across both the scripts. So yeah, certainly, definitely we'll get there.
Okay. There is something from Kimya Gandhi. She's saying this
Hi,
looks
Kimya.
good, Muthu. Then another one from Shreyash Misram says very subtle. Muni Anandakrishnan saying truly commendable and unique initiative, Muthu. Great lecture, Muthu, inspiring to watch.
That's Professor Anandakrishnan, the former Vice Chancellor of Annai University.
Suehil Khan, thanks, Muthu, for the great and inspiring presentation. There is another question from Shreyash Misram. What inspired you to do this project in the first place? And could you please explain to why we need such a font?
Yeah, okay. Great. I was hoping for a question like that. What inspired me to do this was, I write a lot of articles, not a lot, but I do write articles in Tamil. And every time I want to mention something in a different tone, for example, I want to put a quote, I want to quote a verse from the Tirukkural, or, put in one of my father's poems. He's a poet, So when I want to do that, I want to say that in a different voice, right? So in English, what we do is we can paste, and if it's Times New Roman, we just click on the italics button. It gives us a completely different typeface. It's not just slanting an upright Roman, it's a different typeface. But I couldn't do that. And italics, just taking an Indian typeface, any language for that matter, and just applying italics to it, I thought it was too cheap an approach, just because there was a button there in my word processor, I just used that. So I was actually exploring this design of, okay, what if I want a casual style, that I can use for emphasis, for example. So that's what inspired me to do this. And like my all other designs in the last 10 years, whatever new design that I take on, I would like to see how it can be applied across all scripts. Some of them, yeah, you can realize harmony in some, but some you can't. But this one I wanted to, because I did not see that many designs that were done for emphasis in Indian languages. So there's also an area of research in there, which I'm, hoping to explore and enjoy.
There is some more. Nana wants to say that it is a well-designed font with harmony.
Yeah.
And another question is, how to become a member of TSI from Facebook? That is to me.
Yes.
So, there are two ways to do it. One is in Facebook. You can find facebook.com/groups. There is a group called Typography India. In that, you can send a request to join and we will approve the request. Another is about, we have so many WhatsApp groups. Whenever a group gets full with 256 members, we start a new one. So we have so many groups of that. So if you send your mobile number in your email ID, I will, the email ID is sampark.tsi@gmail.com. We will add you to the latest, whichever WhatsApp group has that membership remaining. Mainly we discuss things through this WhatsApp groups and our Facebook group. And all the announcements about all the things are done through this. And you can read our blog also, typographyindia.blogspot.com. Yeah. And Muthu, I would like to request you something more about the other fonts which you have done for HTTP and all that. That if you can share some of the experiences with that.
Okay. So there are two family of fonts that I did for all the other scripts. One is the Sangam family, which was actually meant for, the original intent was for web browsing and user interfaces. So the Sangam family, you would not see that much, variations of color or features. They are just to make sure that the script works, as it should, and and they are all like low contrast designs, which is what they use for user interfaces, like the San Francisco or the Noto-san's series of fonts that were used for the Android devices. So that's the goal. That was the Sangam thing. That I did that in the year 2007, 2008, thereabouts, where there weren't enough specifications available on how the scripts work. And there wasn't enough sample fonts available that had the correct shaping of this text. So I did that in Apple Advanced Typography, AAT, and not OpenType. But later on, I added the OpenType features to that. The other one is MN series, which is whatever the script name followed by MN. So you have Tamil MN, Devanagari MN, Oriya MN, and it goes like that. That's meant for documents. So those will have contrast, like your Times New Roman or Georgia or something like that. Again, the goal was not harmony, but to make sure that each font meets the requirements of that script, and that they properly render the text correctly when you compose documents on them. These are the two family of scripts that I did for multiple languages. The rest of my work were previous work that was done in Tamil.
Now, let me look at the other questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do the traditional calligraphers react to this kind of? Because when we look at a font designer, so we do a lot of this kind of adaptations of a traditional font. We need to balance the technological requirements, communication requirements also. So I just wanted to know, for example, in Tamil, the kind of improvisations you did and in this particular font. How do the traditional calligraphers and the artists and designers there, how do they react to such a
Okay,
improvisation?
good, very good question. Um, I, the more I'm in one of those WhatsApp groups. I was probably one in the early WhatsApp groups, and probably now full already. And I see a lot of very interesting shares of calligraphy, beautiful calligraphic work done by many calligraphers in India. The more I see, the more I realize that there are actually two different fields of study.
Yeah.
I don't know, because calligraphy is, it encompasses the entire message that you want to write, right? And it's usually very short. So it could be a phrase or a small poem that you want to calligraph, right? So everything is connected. And then, you even have a swash that goes from the bottom line to the top line and all that. That adds beauty to the presentation, right? So you have to see the entire content in a holistic approach. That's my opinion. Whereas in typography, you look at small pieces and make sure that they fit into one another harmoniously when you use them in text, right? So there's definitely going to be a lot of compromises, and particularly Indian languages, you're going to realize a lot of what do you call contextual forms. Particularly when you're doing cursive style typefaces, you can probably end up having multiple variants of the K or the E matra, for example, depending on what letter sits before, what letter sits after. So there's a lot of research, some technical work that's involved in getting a typeface to work with each letter that is adjacent to it. That's where the difference is. So I don't think the role of the calligrapher is obsoleted by typography. It never will be, because the approach.
I just want to know how they react to.
Correct. Yeah. So, I think some of them understand the need, understand the situation that warrants such compromises. In fact, I'm a typographer, I'm a typeface designer. So every calligraphic presentation that I teach, that I see, the first thought that comes to my mind is this typefaceable? Will it be possible for it to realize the typeface I can do these things? And I'm also a font engineer, so even more exciting when it comes to seeing contextual fonts. So that's my view. So a calligrapher looks at the entire content and think of how to present them in a single sitting, whereas a typographer look at smaller pieces, and I think they understand each other's requirements. Yeah.
And when you do a multi-script font like this, you have already laid down certain rules, visual grammar. So
yes.
Because you have done Devanagari, there is Latin, Devanagari, and Tamil.
Right.
Now, when you add more languages to this, for maybe next 2 years, you will add 4 of them.
Right.
So you have already drawn certain playground markings.
Right.
In when you did this 4 so
far. Sure. If you look at
when you do Gurumukhi now, do you think it is a restriction also?
Okay.
Because you have already written down rules of the game.
Right.
So how do you manage that?
Okay. I don't want to conceive a decision yet. If you look at the choices that I made, it's 3 different scripts from 3 different regions. Yeah. So you have Tamil, which more South India, Devanagari, which is the Northern Indian calligraphic tradition. Tamil is South Indian palm leaf, stylus tradition, and Latin, which is from the Western tradition. So there are three different groups already. So I think that was probably the biggest challenge, right? Now, when we add Gurmukhi, for example, Gurmukhi doesn't differ too much from Devanagari. I mean, of course, it's not the same as Devanagari, but it has some similarities. It has the headline, so that's one there already. All right. So we look for similarities. You see, when you want to design for harmony, we look for similarities. When you want to bring out the design or the characteristics of the typeface, then we look for specifics, right? What's good at it, for example, if you look at Bengali, for example, the triangle is the specific.
Triangle.
Yeah, the triangle is a specific. So you want to highlight that. You want to bring that up. You want to, promote that. To give that. From far you can look at it. Hey, that must be Bengali, right?
Because the grid structure is so different.
Exactly.
Every culture, the font grid structure varies drastically.
Correct. So, but when you look at multiscript and when you look at harmony, then you look for similarities.
And right? the joineries, the scaling of the joineries, that philosophy or the SOP also might have changed from every script, which you have done. Because it also can't be unique.
Okay. I think we can use the same. There are possibilities, there are possible areas where we can reuse the technique in specific scripts. The script that I'm most concerned about, not there yet, but the one that I'm most concerned about is Oriya. I think it's a Northern Indian script that has some South Indian resemblance. So it's very unique in the way it's written.
Yes.
So I haven't figured out, what kind of treatment we need to make those letter forms synchronize or harmonize with what we already have in Annai. That's going to be a challenge.
How do you manage the X height issue? The X height changes drastically, when you go to look at any Indian language font. And when you compare it with Latin, there is a lot of difference in the X height.
Yeah.
For example, if you take Telugu, so there are a lot of characters which come on top of one another or below.
Right.
And then a matra will come. So the X height proportionately reduces.
Correct.
And might not be the same with English, with Tamil. It will be very different in Bengali also. So the X height, there is a drastic variation in X height when you look at the Indian scripts. So how do you manage when you do a multi-script font? Because you need to look at the X height.
Correct. I try not to use the X height as a benchmark or as a marker. When you talk about harmony, you also talk about avoiding script dominance, right? For example, in Annai, the Sharareka actually is above the X height. It doesn't sit on or below the X height, it's above the X height. So if you use a ruler and measure, the Devanagari may look taller than Latin or Tamil. But if you put the Devanagari on the X height, for example, then the most important part of the glyph gets condensed. The X height steals the show, right? Then you will see that Devanagari looks very condensed when you compare to, and then the other scripts may dominate. So you need to move that up a little bit. So, but we are not going to see that many lines of text that will have characters or letters from different scripts intermixed into the same line. That's not going to happen, right? But you have words, that are interplaced between a sentence, right? So the goal is to see that the script is not drowned or it's not overwhelming the other script that is next to it. So what I do is, instead of using the X height as the measure, I take the overall middle portion of the salient part of the glyph. I give you an example. You know, there's this old Tamil newspaper in Malaysia called Tamil Nation, which I used to read when I was 6 years old. Right? So when I started doing typography, I was very interested in some of the display faces they were using. They were like wooden types, you know, wood types. And I looked at one of them, and then I tried to copy that design. I mean, I didn't do that, but I tried to copy the design and make it into a text typeface. Mm-hmm. It didn't work. That's because all of the marks that went on top and all of the descenders were drastically reduced to just bring out the most important part of the glyph, visible, prominently visible. So when you read a headline from far, you can read the text without losing its meaning, right? So it didn't work for text typeface when you read up, close, in close up. So like that, when you look at different styles of typefaces, I look at the most important part of that glyph. What actually makes, what actually gives meaning to that glyph? If it is cur, which is the part that makes cur look like cur? Not the headline, it's not the X height, but it's the stem and the two curves that goes, next to each other. So I try to highlight that and make that appear in the middle, right? So the Chararika can go above the X height, the descender can go below the baseline, that's okay. But as long as when they are in the same line, they appear harmoniously. So that's the rule of the game of this particular typeface.
There is one question. Do you start solo and then get a team together, or there is a team since the beginning for this projects?
A lot of this is done out of hobby first. I think like all designers, all creators, musicians, people who create art, a lot of the dream starts in their head, yes. As solo, the sparks get triggered when you're walking in the park, or while eating some food or watching a movie, and then you start sketching, you do some group studies and all that stuff. As much as I like to work on all this letters individually, because I like to touch and feel them, I'm actually very passionate about, designing typefaces for any language for that matter. There is practical limit that you can't do beyond, right? So then I work with people who are very interested, and that can be challenging because you need like-minded people. You need people who are, because it's your baby, and you want people to really handle it with care, right? So that much of passion, must be in that to realize it together. So Sweli and Sinjan, who are my good friends in Malaysia, they've been very helpful in providing feedback, because they wanted to make sure that the concept of my design is not lost when they extended my Latin design to include the extended Latin character. So we had constant exchanges in doing that. So yeah, the short answer is no, I don't have a team to start with. It starts in my head, and then I look for people who can give life to that idea, and then we build it together.
Okay, I will just share a screen for the concluding slides, and I'll come back in a minute, because many people are asking about the email ID and how to become.
Okay.
On behalf of the organizing team, myself, Tarundeep Girdhar, Dr. D. Udayakumar and Chirag Gandhar, we would like to thank Muthu for accepting our invitation. I want to especially thank the Hasgeek team and all the group members. And this is the blog ID and the website ID and the email ID. So whoever wants to join in can write to us, and the details about the Facebook group, everything is in the blog. And we have a YouTube channel also, where all the previous lectures can be seen. sampark.tsi@gmail.com is the email ID. So with that, I will conclude, and Romba Nandri.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you very much.
much.